Hello and welcome to Decision 2000, the U.S. Senate debate. I'm Dawn Hobby. For the next hour, we will hear from two of the candidates in the special United States Senate election to fill the unexpired term of the late Senator Paul Coverdale. The candidates tonight are former Democratic Governor Zell Miller, who has been appointed to fill this Senate seat until the November 7th election, and former Republican Senator Mack Mattingly, who held this Senate seat for one term back in the 1980s. The candidates are running in a nonpartisan special election, so even though both of them have ties to the state's top two parties, political affiliation will not be denoted on your ballot November 7th. Tonight, the candidates will answer questions from the moderator and a panel of journalists. Our panelists for this evening are Steve Meadows, who is the managing editor of the Valdosta Daily Times newspaper, Teresa Whitaker of WRBL TV in Columbus, and Dennis O'Hare from WPBA and WXIA, where he is a political reporter. For our debate this evening, the candidates will have 2 minutes each to make opening remarks, and then we will proceed with our questioning. The panelists will alternately ask questions to the candidates. The candidate to whom the question is addressed will have 1 minute for response. At this time, we're going to go to a commercial break and remove a disruption, and we'll be right back.
This is what democracy looks like. This is what democracy.
Now protect yourself and your family before it ever strikes. Introducing the new Center 10 customized weather radio, your round-the-clock lifeline to National Weather Service watches and warnings. It comes pre-programmed and tested for your personalized coverage area. With a sounding alarm and traveling DC car adapter, our weather radio is the smartest investment you can make in emergency and safety. It even has battery backup. Order now for $79.95. Call toll-free or order online at WALB.com.
When you need to get caught up on the latest medical news, go to WALB.com and click on the health icon. Stay informed on the newest medical treatments and technology. WALB.com Health News is sponsored by Jefferson Davis, DDS MD, certified by the American Board of Plastic Surgery, performing plastic, cosmetic, and reconstructive surgery in Albany since 1994. Get local stories on medical and health news, advice, and education at WALB.com.
Honest work at honest prices. Albany Vacuum and Repair. Free pickup and delivery with same-day service.
Hot dog, I can't believe it. 10 hot dogs for $5.99, plus that famous Euro sandwich at the Hot Dog King.
Precision Tune Auto Care. Quality service guaranteed. You'll love our deals.
Did you know DJ's Car Wash has been locally owned and operated for 27 years? And now you know.
WALB can help your business make money while you and others save money.
Super Coops, we deliver value and a whole lot more.
2000, the U.S. Senate debate. Moments ago, I was going over our format with you. I think we completed that. We had to take a quick break to handle a minor disruption in the studio. Our apologies for that. Again, tonight, former Senator Mack Mattingly, Senator Zell Miller here with us to answer questions. I introduced our panelists to you, and as decided by a coin toss earlier this evening, Senator Miller will begin with his 2-minute opening statement. Good evening, Senator Miller.
Thank you. It's good to be back in Albany, and I want to thank everyone who made this debate possible. The hand of fate, not political ambition, has brought me to this night. We're here because of the tragic and untimely death of Senator Paul Coverdale, and I wish that it were not so. My prayers and thoughts are still with the Coverdale family. Most of you have known me for a long time. You know that I was raised in the mountains by a strong mother, that I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, that I was the governor who created the Hope Scholarship Plan and the voluntary pre-kindergarten program. We put computers in the classrooms. We raised teacher salaries to the highest in the Southeast. We started boot camps for juvenile offenders, and we passed 2 strikes, the toughest crime law for violent criminals in the nation. We cut taxes 3 times. We cut over $1 billion in taxes. We made Georgia a national leader in welfare reform. We averaged creating 2,000 new jobs in Georgia a week. That's the kind of governor I was. Now let me tell you about the kind of senator I'll be. I will focus on educating our children and protecting our families. That means putting a well-trained, well-paid teacher in every classroom and setting high standards for students and teachers. I want a prescription drug benefit under Medicare for all of our seniors, not just some, a guaranteed benefit that will start just as soon as possible because they need it. I want a real patient's bill of rights so that your health care decisions will be made by your doctor and not some bureaucrat or bean counter. And I will protect Social Security by placing it in a lockbox so politicians can't get their hands on it and waste it.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Mattingly, your opening statements, please. You have 2 minutes.
Thank you. 2 years ago, Georgians elected to fill a Senate seat with a person who possessed a conservative philosophy and ideology. They elected a man who supported lowering taxes, reforming our Social Security system to ensure its long-term solvency, and improving schools to provide more choice. The man Georgians elected for this task, my friend Senator Paul Coverdale, passed away with less than 1/3 of his term completed. In the special election to fill the remainder of Senator Coverdale's term, Georgians are at a crossroads. Whether they want to continue the conservative work started by him or abandon it totally by electing a candidate from another party whose philosophy differs greatly from that of Senator Coverdale and myself. I have served in the United States Senate from 1981 to 87. During my term, I built a record of supporting lower taxes, reducing the size of government, and protecting Georgia's vital interests, including agriculture and defense. I offer experience and a voice in the Senate majority for Georgians. With the appointment of Senator Miller, Georgia does not have a voice in the Senate majority for the first time since 1955. In addition, thanks to my previous service, the Majority Leader of the United States Senate has said that my seniority will help me get a place on the Agriculture and Senate Appropriations Committee. Both committee assignments important and vital to our state. While my previous experience helps, I realize that new problems require new solutions. Prescription drug benefits, for instance, I support a program that will provide help immediately and not wait, and provide real choice for citizens, something that the other side does not offer in its plan. I will work to ensure that young Americans have a Social Security system that will be there when it is their turn to retire. Lastly, I will see to it that the large tax burdens placed upon us by the Clinton administration are rolled back and taxpayers enjoy some of the benefits of the government surplus.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. That concludes our opening remarks at this time. Now we'll begin our question-answer portion of this debate. And the first question this evening will be asked by me to Senator Miller. Senator Miller, you have expressed pride in your ability to cut taxes as governor of this great state, and you say you will be known as the tax cut senator. Tell us how you plan to do that, please.
Well, I was a tax-cutting governor, and I will be a tax-cutting senator. And I mentioned some of it a while ago. I cut the income tax in this state 3 different times. We abolished the state sales tax from groceries. And that is over $1 billion in tax relief. That's what I'll continue to do when I get to the Senate. We first need to take care of Social Security. We need to take it, put it in a lockbox along with Medicare. We need to start paying down the national debt because that is the best tax cut that we can give because it's a tax cut for our children and our grandchildren. We can do that, and we can still have enough taxes, enough money to do the Marriage Penalty Relief Act. It doesn't make any sense that when a couple gets married, they have to pay $1,400 more a year in taxes than if they were living out of wedlock. And I want to do away with the estate or death tax because death should not be a taxable event.
Okay,
They're bad tax policies, and they also go against our American values.
Thank you, Senator Miller. You have 1 minute to respond, Senator Mattingly.
Well, I would say that that sounds good, except from the standpoint that in the party that he's in, the Democrat Party, you play on a team in Washington, D.C. It's not like being governor. Up there, you have a Democrat side of the aisle and a Republican side of the aisle. The side that I'm on is the Republican side, the one with the conservatives, the one that have the record in tax cuts, the one that has a responsible conservative philosophy and direction for our country, whereas the other side of the aisle is really a choice between liberals on that side. Now, when we look at taxes, when Senator Miller was governor, he did cut taxes, but also at the same time, he did typically what the Democrats do. They raise fees, which are taxes on our people, by over $200 million by raising them on birth certificates, hunting license, and driver's license, and things like that. So there is a difference in the philosophy of the two of us and the direction that we would want to take and head our people in the state.
Okay, thank you, Senator Mattingly. Mr. Meadows, your question now for Senator Mattingly, please.
Senator, the average Joe and Marge voter is increasingly confused by the fuzzy math being used by candidates when they talk about projected budget surpluses, Social Security lockboxes, and Congress spending tax money that's yet to be paid. They've heard all the promises before, so how can you assure them that your Social Security reform plan will actually work?
Well, if you would just want to take one element of the Social Security reform plan, first off, there's approximately over 10 years projection of $4.6 trillion surplus. Now, we all know in Congress you only deal with 2-year budget cycles. So you have to deal with that element of it. In Social Security, the difference between our proposal is that, and the Democrat proposal, is we want to take Social Security and save it and secure it and make certain that people are on retirement or near retirement retain their benefits. Well, we also want to give an option for young people to take part of their Social Security and personalize it and put it in some type of an investment account for them. So in their years of retirement, they will have really more than what their fathers had and their grandfathers had for retirement type programs. You know, we must take and try to reform some of these programs. And I think that is the direction we'll go in. I know that the Democrats also want to save and secure Social Security with part of the surplus, but they don't give an option to the young people to try to give them an opportunity to move and save for themselves.
Senator Miller.
When I was governor, we cut taxes $1.3 billion. We raised fees $200 million. That comes out at over $1 billion tax cut. If you could do something like that in Washington, we'd be a lot better off. Another thing, you continue to talk about this team that I'm on. It's not whose team you're on, Mack. It's whose side you're on. And I'm on the side of Georgians. We've had 47 votes since I've been in the Senate. 41 of those votes, I voted the same way that Trent Lott voted. 2 times that I voted different than Trent Lott was because he was trying to increase congressional salaries, and I voted against those 2. Social Security is a promise that was made. It's a promise that we've got to keep. And the way that we do it is that we take 15% of our surplus each year for 10 years, shore up the Social Security, put it in a lockbox, which means taking it off budget, just exactly like we did the lottery money in Georgia, where it can't be used for anything else except one purpose.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Ms. Whitaker, your question now for Senator Miller, please.
Senator Miller, Congressman Bob Barr says he wants to close down barge navigation on the Chattahoochee River between Columbus and the Gulf of Mexico, and there is a concern that that would derail plans for a marina to be located in Columbus, which conceivably could generate millions of dollars and tourist money. We would like to know if you support the denavigation of the Chattahoochee between Columbus and the Gulf.
I have been in on several hours of meetings since I've been in Washington with Senator Graham and representatives from Florida, and also congressmen from Alabama, and of course Congressman Sanford Bishop. This is a problem that needs to be studied. There are certain arguments to be made on both sides, but I would like to be able to see, and I want to wait until we see what the study says, but I would like to see that barge traffic continue because it's very important to the city of Columbus, and it's very important to the port in Bainbridge. That's still one of our ports that we must make sure thrives and does well. But we have to take into consideration how these other people feel and what some of their arguments are, and that's what we're in the process of doing right now.
Senator Mattingly.
Well, I somewhat agree with what Senator Miller has stated. I think when I was in the United States Senate, they were also discussing the same issue. And you know, they will probably continue to study it, but the resolution really has to come from the state levels, basically, in this arena, to try to get Alabama and Georgia and the rest of them to get together. But I noticed that when I was in the United States Senate, all the time that was going on, that I was able to also try to make certain that we set aside some monies during the Reagan administration for the purchase of some of the property out on the Chattahoochee to make certain that we preserved it. Same thing we did at Cumberland Island, and also some areas up in North Georgia. And the purpose of that was to try to make certain that we secured some property and for our state and for our taxpayers. And I think I was, if I recall, back in 1985, I was awarded the Conservation of the Year award at that time, which I'm so proud of.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Mr. O'Hare, your question for Senator Mattingly?
Senator Mattingly, both national campaigns have talked a good deal about overhauling the nation's military and improving our military readiness, bringing our systems into the 21st century. Georgia has a great many military bases throughout the state. If there is a military overhaul by either administration, whichever national campaign is the winner, and it talks about moving away from the traditional emphasis on conventional forces, would you absolutely make a priority to save Georgia bases, or would you say we have to move to new weapons and military systems first before concentrating on saving Georgia bases?
Well, we can move to new military systems and save Georgia bases. Having been in the United States Senate and chairman of the Military Construction Committee there, and also being Assistant Secretary General at NATO, being in charge of all the air, land, and sea armaments and cooperative arrangements over there, and being a U.S. ambassador, I think I understand, you know, a lot of the technicalities of the new types of weaponry coming along. And, you know, even though we have new types of sophisticated weapons, that does not mean that we do not retain military personnel, ground forces, and things of that nature. And Georgia has played a vital interest through the years in military bases. We can look here in Albany at the Marine base here, Kings Base, submarine base, Fort Stewart in Savannah, Fort Gordon in Augusta, and Fort Benning in Columbus, and Fort McPherson, and several other places that we have. They, and Warner Robins especially, because of the logistics that it does. So it is in the interest that we maintain those bases until some new type of arrangement, type of weaponry, which I don't see in the future at this point going to impact our bases.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Senator Miller?
I've been through that as governor, whenever we saved the bases from being closed in Georgia, with the good help of Senator Coverdale and Senator Nunn and many of the congressmen and a lot of other people, including General Burba, and I'd like to thank them for that good work. From the time that I was a Marine recruit at Parris Island, I have stood for a strong military. And first thing I did after being appointed to this position, the very next week, was to tour many of the military installations in Georgia, because I know how important they are. And I wanted to see what was going on there. I've always believed, as Winston Churchill said, that we must show the same sense of purpose during peacetime that we showed during wartime. And I believe that military readiness prevents war, and I believe that military weakness invites war. And as far as I'm concerned, there would be no discount price on national security.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Mr. Meadows, your question for Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, I'd like for us to continue that same line there. If you talk with any military personnel at any of the Georgia bases, they'll tell you that they have great needs. They'll talk about how they need more spare parts, how they need more pilots, how they need more time with their families and fewer deployments, more pay. What will you do to improve conditions for our men and women who are in the armed forces?
You're right. That was one of the things that I heard. Don't make any mistake about it. We still have the strongest military in the world. We're still well-equipped, well-trained, and well-prepared, but we've got to make sure that we stay that way. We've got to make sure that we're giving these servicemen and women the kind of quality of living that we would want them to have. I worry that enlistments are down everywhere. No one's making their quota except the Marine Corps. I worry that a lot of soldiers and sailors and airmen and Marines, men and women, are not re-enlisting. We're seeing good young captains decide that they'll get out and do something else, because today about 70% of our servicemen and women are married. We've got to have better schools for them. We've got to have better housing for them. We've got to have better equipment for them. And also, we should not have as many deployments as we have had in the last several years. That also is working a hardship.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly.
Well, I saw the similar thing back in 1981 when I went to the United States Senate, along with Ronald Reagan as President of the United States. We had a military that was in disaster. There was no pride in the military. We're not in quite that bad a shape today. But the reason why we have the lack of pride at this time is because of the leadership we've been getting from the White House. And the nation's military has to be rebuilt. We cannot let it decline like it's been declining the last 8 years. We've got military personnel that are on food stamps. Their pay needs to be raised where it's comparable to the pay in the private sector. We also need to make certain that their living conditions. You go to Fort Stewart, we have personnel living in wooden barracks. That's ridiculous at this time in our life in the military. And we do have to make certain that we restore the military equipment to its rightful level, like building the F-22 in Marietta and the C-130J in Marietta, and making certain that we do the right things. And as Senator Miller said, not over-deploy our troops, but that was done by a Democrat president who didn't know what he was doing.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Ms. Whitaker, your question for Senator Mattingly.
Senator Mattingly, if we could stay on the subject of the military. Columbus, Georgia, as you know, is a military town with Fort Benning right there. And what with the crisis in the Middle East, people are asking, are our soldiers going to get involved? As a senator, do you support the efforts that are going on right now, i.e. the diplomatic efforts, President Clinton being there, or do you feel like there should be a stronger show of presence in the Middle East, given the fact that there have been some loss of lives among U.S. sailors?
Well, having been in the U.S. Senate for 6 years, from 81 to 87, I learned one thing. There are 100 U.S. senators, there's 435 representatives, and you don't need 535 people trying to govern foreign policy. The President of the United States is responsible for the foreign policy. We need to speak with one voice at this time, and that's what we need to back him up, no matter what party he's in, because we can only follow one leader at a time. And it is up to, I think, the Congress to get behind President Clinton with whatever he's going to be doing in the Mideast, trying to negotiate settlements over there. And hopefully it will work out, but we'll just have to wait and see.
Senator Miller?
I think that Senator Mattingly used an unfortunate word a while ago when he said that there was no pride out there among our military troops. There's plenty of pride among the military troops that I've seen and that I've talked to when I've toured these bases. Sure, the morale can be improved. And sure, other things can be improved, as I mentioned a while ago. As far as this event that has happened in the Mideast, let's remember that 17 American servicemen and women have been brutally murdered. And we must track down and find who did this, even if we have to follow them to the ends of this earth. And we must retaliate in a way that is obvious to the world that we're not going to stand for this. I do think we have to speak with one voice, and I appreciate Senator Mattingly saying that. And I've been very impressed that that's what both the Democratic and Republican leaders are saying in Congress right now. We're in a serious, serious situation.
Thanks, Senator Miller. Mr. Hayer, your question for Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, picking up and changing the subject a little bit, picking up on a question that was asked of Senator Mattingly in your debate last night. RU 486, commonly called the abortion pill, was recently approved by the Food and Drug Administration. There have been efforts to at least put together some restrictions in Congress. Would you support restrictions on the use of RU 486?
First, let me say that I am pro-choice. I'm not pro-abortion. I support a woman's right to choose because I think it's the most intimate personal decision that anyone could make, and she must be able to make that without governmental interference. She must be able to make it with her family and her doctor and her God. And the bottom line is, certainly we should have some restrictions on abortion, like parental consent, restrictions like on the process known as birth abortion. I signed a law in Georgia restricting that. As far as drug, I think that it has been proved by science that it is a safe way for an abortion. And I think abortion should be safe and legal and rare.
Senator Mattingly.
Well, just to clarify, I can tell you that I read in today's paper that down in Florida, one of the university systems down there made the comment that it was not a contraceptive, but it was an abortion pill, which they would not condone, and they were not going to recommend on the campus of whichever college it was down there. I mean, the facts of the matter are it is not a contraceptive. It is something that is put forth by the FDA, and it is an abortion pill. And, you know, I will say once again, I'm pro-life, and I mean, I just think that this is not wise policy, but it's already done. You know, and I think the question last night was, what would happen if something came before the United States Senate? You know, and you'd have to see what it was first, whether they're going to amend it or what they were going to do with it. But lastly, I would like to say that in respect to what Senator Miller said about the pride in the military, I'm proud of our military. What I'm not proud of is our commander-in-chief, who was a draft dodger.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Mr. Meadows, your question for Senator Mattingly.
Senator, both major presidential candidates have focused on the subject of educational reform. Now the governor of Georgia, Roy Barnes, has made his controversial school improvement plan a key focus for his first term. What do you see as the role of the federal government in improving our nation's schools?
First off, it shouldn't be more than 6%, because they only give 6% of the money to education in the United States. But they do, in the past, they've given more regulations, which they need to move away from. You know, the best thing they could do would be, in the United States Senate, would be pass the Coverdale savings account legislation. In other words, for allowing the parents to put the money aside tax-free, which I know that Senator Miller has already co-sponsored that legislation. But, you know, the problem is not, and the answers cannot come from Washington, D.C. And, you know, most of the time, they can't even come from Atlanta or the capitals of the state. You know, all due respect to the, then Governor Miller, he gave us a Hope Scholarship, which is one of the best things that happened. The unfortunate thing is, like Chancellor Porch said, access without any reasonable chance of success is a fraud. In other words, we're sending 30% of the students that go to the university system here in Georgia have to come home because they can't read or write. We need to address elementary and high school education in our state, in our nation. And I think George Bush is speaking to that.
Senator Miller.
I wouldn't want to tell those students over there at the University of Georgia that have the highest SAT scores that have ever come along at the University of Georgia that they can't read and write. I'm glad you acknowledge that I support the Coverdale and am a co-sponsor of his tax savings bill. I wrote him when I was governor and he was senator and he first introduced it, but I thought it was a good piece of legislation, and I'm very pleased that I can be there to help carry it on for him. I think most of you know that education is my passion, and we accomplished a lot as governor, but of course, as always, we have a lot more to do. Education is always a work in progress. I believe that we should expand federal funding in certain areas, not in every area, but in certain areas like early childhood education, certainly in teacher training, and in school construction. And we certainly must make sure that all of our children can read. I support public school choice like we have in Georgia, and I'm a proponent of charter schools.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Ms. Whitaker, your question for Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, on the subject of educating children, I think that if you ask anyone who is running for office, in fact, educating children is very important. But then you would have people say, how can you educate children if they're in school worrying about being shot or killed? What do you see as the role of the federal government in trying to make sure that our children are safe in schools?
I would rate schools on their safety and then make sure that that information is available to parents. I think that would go a long way. I also think that we should do more with alternative schools for our troubled kids so that they will not be in with the other children who are trying to learn.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Mattingly.
First, I mean, I think, you know, the more you can keep the federal government out of it, the better off you are, to be honest with you. I mean, the responsibility is it should be at the local level, you know, get off the backs of the teachers, allow them to teach in this state and around the world, around the country here. But the, you know, we have to, you know, the bottom line is reading is the gateway to learning. If you can't read, you can't learn. If you can't read, you get in trouble. The children need to begin learning how to read. That needs to be the focus. Like in the Head Start programs, President-to-be, I hope, George W. Bush, says in the Head Start they want to prioritize, make certain that in that program they prioritize reading and math. And I think, you know, that's a direction that they can point that government program in that would be worthwhile for the state of Georgia and across the country.
Thank you. Mr. O'Hare, your questions first. Senator Mattingly.
Senator Mattingly, Senator Miller mentioned school choice in Georgia. Would you support, if it came before the Senate, expanded use of private school vouchers? And if so, where would the money come from to fund those vouchers? Would it come directly from the budget of the Department of Education?
Well, first, I mean, I know that the talk about use of vouchers, which I think is a good idea. I think we need to try new things. You know, we haven't tried vouchers that much in the United States, and we really need to pursue that. But I think that voucher, whether it would be, the money would have to probably be given to the states because they don't put that much money into that program from the federal government. For them to say that we're going to have vouchers over here and only 6% of it is available to them, that's not much money for somebody who wants to try a voucher program. But I think it needs to be tried and not just shot down because somebody doesn't like it. It's a program that should be tried in our state, in our country. And, you know, if it takes a block grant to give it to the states to make certain that they try the voucher program, then that's what we should do.
Would it be Department of Education money that would be used for those block grants?
Well, I mean, you know, it's all taxpayers' money, whether it comes from the Department of Education or wherever it comes from. If it came from the Department of Education, that'd be fine, but it should be block granted directly to the state with no strings attached to it other than it be directed to the voucher programs.
Senator Miller.
We have a broad public choice law in this state, and I think it's working very well. And as far as vouchers, if you look at our voluntary pre-kindergarten program, it is sort of a voucher program in that they can choose to go to a public school kindergarten or they can go to a private school kindergarten. But taking vouchers right now and taking that money out of the public school system is what, like your question asked, I think would be not the thing to do. Here we are needing to reduce the pupil-teacher ratio. We've got kids trying to learn in trailers. We're losing new teachers. The new teachers that come in, many of them are leaving before they teach 5 years. This is not the time to take money out of the public school system. We need to be putting more in, not taking it out, and vouchers takes it out.
Thank you, Senator Miller. We're going to take a break now. We'll return in just a moment with more of Decision 2000, the U.S. Senate debate. Don't go away.
There is a way to catch up on today's local news.
When you get home, it's
We resume our question
Friday
and
nights
answer
at 8
segment
p.m.
now, and I have
on
a
our
question for you, Senator Mattingly. Even though this is a nonpartisan election and there will be no R's or D's on the ballot when we cast our votes, it is about partisan politics as far as you are concerned. You've made that very clear that the late, wonderful Senator Paul Coverdale was very much a Republican, and you are making sure that you hang a big fat D around Senator Zell Miller's neck, are you not?
Well, it is a team sport. Let me tell you, in the U.S. Senate, there are two sides up there. One is the Republican side that you sit on, the other is the Democrat side. And my side happens to be the one with Senator Trent Lott, Senator Nichols. And when I go to the United States Senate, in the Republican majority, I can become a subcommittee chairman, and we also set the agenda. When Senator Miller goes to the United States Senate, he's in the minority party. He cannot become a subcommittee chairman, and he does not set the agenda. And you know, to even make it more clear than that is every Tuesday in Washington, D.C., in the U.S. Senate when they're in session, they have policy lunches, only for the Republicans and the Democrats. We go to our room, the Republicans do, and the Democrats go to their room. So it is separate. You know, it is a team sport up there, not a sport, but it is teams that you're on. You know, and I think the people of our state understand that the Republicans are the conservative team, and generally speaking, the Democrats are the liberal team with the Ted Kennedys.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Senator Miller, your response, please.
Well, Mack wants to run against anybody except me. He wants to run against Bill Clinton and Al Gore and Ted Kennedy and Tom Daschle and anybody but me. But the fact of the matter, Mack, is I'm the one that's on that ballot. And partisanship is the problem. It's not the solution. And people are sick and tired of candidates playing party politics and talking about which team you're on and whether you're on this team or that team. Voters don't send people to Washington to take care of party politics. They send them up there to get the job done. One of the finest senators that Georgia's ever had was Sam Nunn. And for 24 years, he reached across party lines and he got things done. And I think that's the way it should be. And if I'm hearing your candidate for president correctly, that's what he's advocating.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Mr. Meadows, your question for Senator Miller, please.
Senator, I'd like to continue that theme. I'd like to come back to a comment you made. You said you voted like Trent Lott a lot of the time. There are those who would say that Senator, you are today kinder, gentler, and further to the right than at any point in your political career. How would you respond to that characterization?
Well, I would respond by looking at my career. It's a pretty well-known career. Was the Hope Scholarship liberal or was it conservative? Was welfare reform liberal or was it conservative? Most of the things that I got passed while I was governor of this state was with a lot of Republican help. I couldn't have passed it with just Democrat help. I think one of the things about being a political leader is building a consensus and trying to get people from both sides of the aisle to agree with you. Senator Mattingly likes to talk about Ted Kennedy. And he also likes to say that he wants to be like Paul Coverdale. Well, the fact of the matter is that Paul Coverdale and Ted Kennedy co-sponsored 59 bills together just over the last 2 years. That's the way it should be, and that's the way I want to do it.
Senator Mattingly.
Well, that'd be nice if it worked that way, but that's not the way it works. The agenda is set by the Republicans in the United States Senate, since we are in the majority party. And Senator Miller may want to ignore that fact, but it's been since 1955 since Georgia has had 2 United States senators in the minority party. When I go around this state, I see people who want a voice at the table. They don't mind having a voice at the table in the Democrat side, but they also want to have a voice at the table in the Republican side because they know it's in the interest of the people of Georgia because we can get more done for the state that way. We did it when Sam Nunn and I served in the United States Senate. And without coining an old phrase that you're no Sam Nunn, you know, I'm no Paul Coverdale either. I'm Mack Mattingly, a conservative United States Senator, Republican. Paul Coverdale was a conservative Republican United States Senator.
Thanks, Senator Mattingly. Ms. Whitaker, your question for Senator Mattingly.
Senator Mattingly, I'm going to switch gears here for just a second. I mentioned that I'm from Columbus with Fort Benning there. Every year, hundreds and hundreds of people line up outside the gates of Fort Benning protesting the School of the Americas, claiming that it is a training ground for terrorists. There have been fact-finding missions. Several members of Congress have come to Fort Benning to visit the school. Based upon everything you have learned, everything you have read, what is your position on the School of the Americas?
Keep it open. They were protesting when I was in the United States Senate at Fort Benning, same time. They have always been groups of people that objected to that. I know that people go around to military bases sometimes objecting. They've done this down in Kings Bay, close to my home. Not the same group, but a different group, protesting different things because of the nuclear weapons on the submarines down there. But the answer is, you know, that's freedom of speech. They can come and protest if they want to. But Fort Benning is going to stay there, and the School of America is going to stay there because it's in the best interest of the United States government to retain that school.
Would you support an extensive investigation into the School of the Americas?
I don't think there's any need to investigate it at all. I mean, I think they've investigated everything enough over the last at least 20 years that I'm aware of in respect to the School of Americas.
Senator Miller?
I support the School of Americas, period.
You have 59 more seconds.
I don't think I can say it anymore.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. O'Hare, your question for Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, there have been concerns raised recently about the use of racial profiling in law enforcement investigations. There has also been talk of some sort of congressional action to ban the use of racial profiling in criminal investigations. If such a bill were to come before the Senate, would you support a measure to ban the use of racial profiling in investigations?
Dennis, you've been around long enough to know that I'm going to answer that by saying I'd sure like to see that bill first. I'm against discrimination in any shape, form, or fashion, and this is certainly something that we must look at. But we must also take in consideration the job that our law enforcement officers have to do. And the ones that I have talked to about that, the really good ones who are veteran officers, they say that most of the problems can be taken care of by better training for law enforcement officers on this subject. I'd like to see the bill. There might be something there that I could support, but I think that you've got to also look at what the law enforcement officers have to do in order to do the job that we want them to do.
Senator Mattingly.
Well, law enforcement, they do profile. I mean, if they just limited racial profiling, that would be illegal. The thing about it, I don't think you need the federal government dealing in it. We need to let the states handle it. You don't need a federal law for everything. I mean, Senator Miller is now sponsoring the hate crimes legislation with Ted Kennedy, who sponsored the bill. Every crime has some degree of hate in it. We don't need that type of legislation because, number one, it belongs to the states. Let the states decide what they want to do in respect to these issues. Every time an issue comes up, it is not necessarily the responsibility of the federal government to deal with it. That is what is one of the amendments in the Constitution is about, is usurping states' rights. And we have to be careful of that.
Mr. Meadows, your question for Senator Mattingly.
Senator, both Democrats and Republicans have given really little more than lip service to the subject of campaign finance reform. If you take a quick look at your war chest and frankly the one of your opponent, it'll reveal that you've got quite a large sum of money that you've already spent and you intend to spend quite a bit more in the next 21 days. Tell us how you would reform campaign finance.
Well, I hope we get more campaign contributions in the next 21 days. That'll help reform it for me. But let me say that I know that Senator Miller is on the McCain-Feingold campaign finance reform. I oppose that legislation because it excludes wiping out union money and corporate soft money. You know, what we need to do, I think, on campaign finance reform is have full and immediate disclosure and wipe out contributions of soft money and corporate and union money, all union money. And that would be a first best start that could really pass the United States Congress, and I think would be a step forward in campaign finance reform.
Senator Miller.
Like Mack, I'm going to play by the rules, and as long as the rules are that we use this kind of money, that's what we have to, that's what we're going to play by. But one of the first things I did when I went to Washington was to sign on as a co-sponsor to the Senator John McCain Bipartisan Campaign Finance Reform Act. I think it is the strongest such piece of legislation to come along ever. And I look forward to being in Washington in the Senate to vote for it so that it will become law, so that the next time anyone runs like we are today, they won't have to go out there and spend all of their time raising money, but they can spend their time talking about their message and meeting people.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Ms. Whitaker, your question for Senator Miller.
Senator Miller, Atlanta is virtually bursting at the seams with economic development, but I think you will agree that if you take a look around certain portions of Georgia, they appear to be struggling. As Senator, do you have a plan to funnel more economic opportunity into struggling, poor areas of the state?
Well, Dennis is very well aware of the BEST program, which was a piece of legislation that was passed whenever I was governor, that provided special incentives for what we called the three-tiered system. That if you were in some of these counties that did not have the economic growth that we'd like to see, that you could get a higher incentive for bringing jobs there than some other county. I'm very pleased to see Lieutenant Governor Mark Taylor and Governor Barnes with their One Georgia program. I think that's needed. One of the best things that can be done to bring all Georgia together is to make sure that all of our children are educated, that we have a skilled workforce. That's what brings jobs to a location, is having skilled workers there. And that's what we've got to make as our first priority.
Senator Mattingly.
Having served on the Senate Appropriations Committee and also was able to get a lot of funding for the state of Georgia, in the Atlanta area, of course, I was very fortunate making certain that we got MARTA funded every year that I was there in the United States Senate, and also assistance for highways for the state of Georgia. But let me tell you, as far as trying to do something for the rest of Georgia, for the people of Georgia, the best thing you do is lower the taxes of the people of Georgia. Look, jobs are created and businesses are created when people have the incentives to create jobs. We're under the highest tax rate now that we've been since World War II by the federal government. It needs to be reduced. We are operating at a surplus in the federal government. Once we take care of Social Security, Medicare, prescription drugs, and on our national defense, we need to take the balance of that money and make certain it comes back to the people of the state of Georgia so they can have the incentives to invest and create jobs.
Thanks, Senator. Mr. O'Hare, your question for Senator Mattingly.
Senator Mattingly, you mentioned Social Security just a moment ago. I want to come back to that for just a second because you've talked about contributing into individual accounts, particularly for younger workers, the opportunity to do that. If many workers take advantage of that, you've also talked about shoring up Social Security for those who are either receiving it or about to. But if you have a good percentage of the workers already contributing into private accounts, then who's going to pay the benefits for those who are either receiving it now or about to?
First off, you have to understand you're only putting aside 2% of their monies. And the challenge is, do you want it to continue to have fewer workers providing money in the Social Security program? You have to give incentives to my children and my grandchildren in order for them to have the opportunity where they can invest both in the Social Security program plus personalize part of their own money in there. We need to reform the Social Security type program, and this is a way to do it. I think it's an option that we must consider. Where they invest it, I'm not quite certain where they're going to invest it. But we need to give these people the options to try to create a better retirement system. And, I think both sides want to make certain that they save Social Security, but what they want to make certain, finally, is they do something for the young people of our country.
But the question was, how do you make that transition? How do you...
You pass the law to make the transition. You say it will run out of money. We say it won't run out of money because we're taking the surplus and shoring it up. And the amount of money that George W. Bush is putting into it takes care of that to give that option. It may take more money than some of the other programs, but at least it's a start in the right direction.
Senator Miller?
The numbers won't work, and Mack knows it, unless you raise the retirement age from 65 to 68, which Mack at one time voted to do. Bob Kerrey, Senator Bob Kerrey of Nebraska, was the first person to come up with this idea. He's a Democrat. And when he did, he pointed out that in order to do it, you'd have to raise the retirement age from 65 to 68, or the numbers won't work. Now, I'm for taking 15% of our surplus each year for 10 years, shoring up Social Security, so that it won't go broke by 2037, which is what would happen if we didn't do anything. And this would extend it at least to 2055. I'm also for what we call Social Security Plus, which is sort of a super IRA. By the way, I'm a co-sponsor of the Roth Expanded IRA. I think this is something that is needed in order to supplement the Social Security benefits.
Thank you, Senator Miller. We have time for one more question. Mr. Meadows, your final question, please, for Senator Miller.
Senator, many people are beginning to say that it's obvious that this country is not winning the war on drugs. For every victory we win in interdiction efforts, literally dozens of shipments make it to the streets. How do you feel the war on drugs is going, and what is the next step our nation needs to take?
It's not going very well at all, and it won't go very well at all until we do what Senator Paul Coverdale wanted to do, and that is go all the way into where the drug sources are, where the narcotics come from, in Colombia, and do certain things there to stop it. That's where this huge source of drugs comes from, and Senator Coverdale was right on target as to how it ought to be dealt with, and I'm very pleased that that's one of the former Coverdale bills that I'm also a co-sponsor of.
Senator Mattingly?
Well, I'm glad that Senator Miller is on a Senator Coverdale bill, but I think when we look back under the Reagan administration with Nancy Reagan proposing this, just say no to drugs, and then, of course, the Congress was funding interdiction and all the other type of educational programs, and with the total war on drugs. You know, it gets down to also from the bully pulpit, from the White House and the Congress and the Senate and the House, of people speaking and becoming active, going across to our schools and talking to the students about drugs and the problem in drugs. You know, the Coverdale legislation was similar to the ones that I put in when I was in the United States Senate to give the president the authority to take away foreign aid from countries that did not comply with stopping the drug issue in their country and shipping out the drugs into the United States. It's a massive problem, you know, and it must be constantly addressed. It's something that's not going to go away, but we need to make certain that we address it all the time.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. That concludes our question and answer portion of this debate. Now we move into the time where our candidates will give some closing statements. They will have 2 minutes each. We begin tonight with Senator Zell Miller.
Thank you. Back years ago when we kids would get to bragging, my mama used to say that actions speak louder than words. For an hour now, you've listened to our words. I hope you will look at our past actions. I hope you'll look at our past records. You have a clear choice. My opponent does not give you a single reason to vote for him except his party registration. I happen to think that a pledge to support any party, either party, 100% of the time is dangerous. This partisan stuff is the problem. It's not the solution. I want to reach across party lines, as I have said, to get things done for Georgia and for America, and we know it can be done because it's the way that Sam Nunn did it for 24 years. I want to be a senator to strengthen Social Security by placing it in a lockbox, taking it off budget so the politicians can't waste it. I want a guaranteed prescription drug benefit under Medicare, one that covers every senior, not just a few, and one that goes into effect just as soon as possible because it is needed. I want a broad patient's bill of rights so that health care decisions can be made by your doctor and your health care professional and not by some HMO or insurance bureaucrat. I want tax cuts, real tax cuts that are both good tax policy and also are the right things to cut. I want to invest and strengthen in public education, always remembering that a well-qualified, respected, well-paid teacher is the most important component of education. I need your support. I need your vote. I care deeply about this state and this 60,000 square miles of real estate we call Georgia that I have spent my entire life serving.
Thank you, Senator Miller. Senator Mattingly.
Thank you. In closing, I want to briefly go back to what I talked about earlier. the concept of the team in the Senate. Senator Coverdale worked with his team, and through that, he gained a position of leadership in the Senate majority. Georgia benefited greatly from his influence. If you don't play with your team, you will not be able to effectively represent Georgia and their values. The leadership of that team steers you in a general direction, liberal or conservative. That is why people like Senator Phil Gramm, Congressman Nathan Deal from our state, Senator Shelby from Alabama, and a lot of others switched parties. They tried to bring their state's conservative values to the National Democratic Party. However, that party would not let them, nor will they in the long run allow Senator Miller. If you really talk about 7.5 million Georgians, you have to pick a team that most closely aligns with their views. Whether we're talking about Social Security, education, taxes, or national defense, a senator needs to be able to play with his team to effectively represent the state. And the fact is, the Republican team fits that bill for Georgia. That is why 8 of Georgia's 11 congressmen are Republicans. I'm going to be part of that team as well. Georgia does not have a voice in the Senate Republican majority. We need to restore what has been taken away from us. I want to be that voice for you in the United States Senate. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Mattingly. Thanks to both of our candidates tonight. Thanks to our distinguished panel of journalists, and thanks to you for watching. That does conclude Decision 2000, the U.S. Senate debate. We sincerely hope that this program has given you some insight on the issues and where these candidates stand. If you would like to see this debate again, it will be rebroadcast at 11 o'clock tonight on Georgia Public Television. Also, C-SPAN plans to tape and air this program periodically. Be sure to check their listings for a schedule. And please remember, get out and vote on November 7th. From the Albany Municipal Auditorium, I'm Dawn Hobby. Have a good night.
During this election season, watch C-SPAN on Friday nights for Debates 2000. Every week, we'll show you recent House, Senate, and Governor's debates.